Jimmy Garoppolo has had a great year and executes at a high level, but also benefits clearly from a healthy Kittle, a top 10 graded Brandon Ayuk, an elite check down with Christian McCaffrey. How does a GM in-house or observing from the outside evaluate a player like Jimmy G? Is it wrong to take some of the team level stats like expected points added or yards per play, where he clearly looks as good as some of the elite quarterbacks? How does an evaluator untangle those things, right? Because I think Jimmy G is a really good Rorschach test for sort of like understanding the QB position.
Years ago, it was about getting a quarterback that you could navigate with. You could have some midline years, you could have some good years, you could have some down years, and it played out like in the end, you're a good, solid football team and you're respected around the NFL. Today is about winning the Super Bowl. It is not for long, as we've mentioned many, many times. In the end, all these beautiful stats, good-looking guy, everything about him, and he's a wonderful person, as I understand from the people there and at New England. That's beside the point. We're talking business here. The business is when it comes down to end cutting time, what happens? Does he win it? Does he make the big play? Does he help you win the Super Bowl at that crunch time? I would say that about anyone. Look, people could throw a dart at me on that with Matt Ryan. Did Matt do it in 16? No. He was an MVP of the entire league that year. But in the end, we step back as GMs and owners and say, can this person finish the play, finish the game, and win us a Super Bowl? That's up for debate, of course.
Yeah, and I think, as somebody who I've only attended one Super Bowl in my life, and it was Chiefs Niners, and you look at Jimmy G and you certainly respect him, but you don't fear him. Maybe that's a way I think to to sort of get around it. But I think he can certainly execute that offense. I've always, and I don't know, I think he's the Ron Burgundy of quarterbacks. I think he throws what's on the teleprompter and he does it really well. But that is what causes interceptions too, because sometimes there's a linebacker right where he's supposed to throw it and he throws it right to that linebacker. And so you see the limitations there, but he certainly can execute. And I think that's what puts him, in my estimation, in the top half of the league. But to your point, to win a Super Bowl when things aren't perfect, you need a top 5 quarterback. And so that's such a hard, eval, because we're all chasing that when in reality, Jimmy G will probably take you to the playoffs more often than not. So
think about that before we go. I know you got to go. John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, through and through football guys who know every nuance from, coach and GM perspective, former player, Hall of Famer. They know that. They know this is about the person that needs to pull them through. Where they are with their young quarterback compared to Garoppolo. Can you imagine going through that in the last year, trying to decide on that? I think before we let you get to the airport here, I do think this is a great question, because and this is a testament to our great listeners who are asking great questions, because I think that this is the second one. Do you sometimes put yourself in that position with a contract? Because I know with Jimmy G, they wanted to trade him, and I think for a long, Washington wanted him, but then his arm was messed up, and then eventually everybody did the musical chairs, and Jimmy G was the one standing. Mm-hmm. And you get to week 1, and then they just give him a contract to be the best backup in football, but they put a lot of outs in the contract for Jimmy G. Namely, they can't franchise tag Jimmy G. So if Garoppolo is going to be the Niners quarterback next year, he's going to be making the max deal because of all the stuff that they put in the contract. Do you find that that's a good way for you as a GM to make the decision before it happens? Because ultimately, whatever the Niners do this year, it's going to be less dependent upon Jimmy G and more dependent on everything else. You drafted Trey Lance because you felt like you needed to put a better quarterback in that spot to win you a Super Bowl. So if Jimmy G has a good run of luck here or a good run of play, you don't want to be mesmerized or drunken by that, right? So just putting things in contracts like that, like the no trade and the no, they basically ensure that he's going to hit free agency after this year and he can make his own choice of what we're to play. Is doing that a smart move for the 49ers? I believe it's a smart move. I believe there are myriad levels to this discussion and this sort of idea of which quarterback are we going to go with, how much can we gain from making that move, with Jimmy, before they decided not to. I mean, I'm just telling you, you don't think that is a massive amount of discussion and effort. And I'm sure it could be heated. Let's take it away from the 49ers because I don't want to be specific to them. Anyone who has a quarterback situation, any similarities to that, day in, day out, there is always discussion. And when you agree upon it as a head coach and a GM, that's great. The next day you might not, because the quarterback might throw a stupid ass interception or something goes on. And then all of a sudden the coach stomps in pissed off and the GM's like, we just agreed that he was the guy we were going with last week. There's this mercurial side of team building that everyone really needs to get their head around. It's not cut and dry. Different levels, different nuances. And then, oh, by the way, you get an owner sometimes in your ear calling you one night late because he's agitated with it, might adjust you. You come back in the morning and you deliver a message to the head coach saying, hey, man, we should approach this. And that head coach might look at you and think, where did that change? It's just a really interesting back and forth discussion.